Hello and welcome to today's webinar entitled Computing in the Early Years. My name is Wendy MacLeod and I work for Computing at School. I'm one of the community outreach managers for communities across London and the East of England. In this webinar, we're going to be discussing issues surrounding the use of technology in the early years, some of the issues surrounding young children returning to school following the lockdown, and how to use technology to support learning across different areas of the curriculum. Joining me this morning are four fantastic panelists, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. First of all, we have Rachel Coulthard. Rachel has been teaching for nearly 30 years and still thinks it's the best job in the world. She was a primary maths specialist for many years, but was asked to take on the role of computing subject lead because no one else wanted it. In a desperate bid to quash the technophobe in her and keep up with her young son, she embarked on many CPD courses, mostly free ones that are run by Computing at School, and found a real passion for using technology effectively in the classroom. She is an early years enthusiast who dabbles in Key Stage 1 and 2. She is a regular on CasChat on Twitter and has written material for Cambridge Assessment and delivered computing courses to teachers for the National Centre for Computing Education. She is also the leader of the Cas Stevenage primary community. Next, we have Louise Wade. Louise began working in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets in 1993 as a class teacher, teaching in both key stages as well as early years. She was both an IT and ICT coordinator and a Senko, and in the late 90s she took a position in the senior leadership team of an Auckland, New Zealand school. After returning to the UK, she worked in Tower Hamlets before taking up a post at the London Metropolitan University IT Learning Exchange, an organisation which aims to support teachers using technology in the classroom. She has worked for a number of CLCs and she currently works across a partnership of schools. She is also a CAS master teacher. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to Vicky Dodds. Vicky has 17 years experience of providing high quality computing curriculums across the primary age range, including early years foundation stage. She has held several computing leadership roles in schools across LEAs in the northeast of England. Her experience includes leading inset training, future-proofing school computing infrastructure, supporting teachers in the provision of computing and mapping out software and assessment. In 2017, Vicky founded Computing for Kids NE to focus her passion and experience in computing towards supporting schools across the region to utilise technology to teach their entire curriculum more effectively. In January 2020, she became the primary lead teacher for the NCCE Computing Hub covering Newcastle, Gateshead, Durham and Cumbria based at Cardinal Hume Catholic School. She now supports teachers and schools to develop their skills through the provision of government-funded CPD. In recent years, Vicky has joined a number of organisations and she is a Barefoot ambassador and leads the CAS Kingston Park community. And my final panellist is Amanda Hubble. Amanda is an early years teacher of 25 years. She is a member of the SMT and a specialist leader of education for Alfreton Nursery Teaching School, leading the computing offer in school. Amanda facilitates the CAS Amber Valley community with an early years specific focus and is presently developing a national assessment and tracking system for early years computational thinking with her CAS community. She has led the integration of computing across the curriculum in her school and supports a fully inclusive approach to computational thinking, working with families and other stakeholders. Computing is one of many passions that Amanda is fully committed to promoting. as a curriculum entitlement for all young children. Waiting in the wings is my colleague Tim Wilson. He is also one of the CAS outreach managers and he covers the Midlands. Tim will be keeping an eye on your questions this morning. So if you have any questions, please can you type them in the questions section, and we'll try to bring as many to our panelists this morning as we can. So the first section this morning is looking broadly at computing in the early years. And my first question is, our webinar is entitled Computing in the Early Years, but from September 2020, the statement regarding technology will be removed from the early years curriculum. So, should teachers continue to teach computing if it's no longer a requirement? And we're going to go to Vicki first to answer this question.
Hi everyone. I just think teaching computing is an inherent part of society today, and the earlier that it's brought in, the better, to be honest. When I researched kind of the pedagogy of teaching, and especially computing teaching, when we look at computational thinking, it's an inherent part of early years education. When we look at the concept map of how computing is taught, especially in the early years and foundation stage, things like persevering, collaborating, tinkering, creating, developing, logic, all of these areas are really well suited to early years and foundation stage. And I think some classes in, especially Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, could use the way computing is taught in the early years as a model for where they teach it. Children having more access to technology from an earlier age. I mean, I've got a 4-year-old and he's more than equipped to pick up technology, and he's engaged in it and interested.
And Rachel, thank you. Rachel, have you got anything else to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. We can't start preparing our young children early enough for the digital world that they're growing up in, I don't think. And by the time they come into our settings, their life experiences will most certainly have involved a huge range of technology, and dare I say, even some digital babysitting. So we need to support them to help them make sense of the world around them. And this has got to include that technology. And from what I've seen in my own classroom, it's really easy to gain evidence of all those really important characteristics of effective learning that Vicki mentioned, the perseverance, the resilience, through the effective use of technology and computing activities in the classroom. You know, that finding out, being willing to have a go, persevering, and also making links. So yes, absolutely, it needs to be threaded throughout the early years and beyond.
Thank you. And my next question is, what is the best way, therefore, to use technology in an early years setting? Louise?
I think that using the best way is as a tool, really, a tool that a child chooses for a specific purpose. So definitely not led by this app, that app, this game, this robot, but it is a tool that they choose to go and create, to go to record their learning, record what was happening in their world, in their classroom, and to be able to review that and talk about it. So it's a stimulus for them to capture their learning, but also to be able to review their learning and talk about that learning. I think that that's really powerful. Plus the idea that, you know, they choose a tool to complete a task, so that they might use it for problem solving, to go about adding how they understand the world, to realise how they understand the world. I think that's important that is up front in computing in the early years.
Would you agree with that, Rachel?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say it needs to be part of that continuous provision. So you have to have walkie-talkies in the home corner, and DVDs, a CD player in the book area, and your digital microscope on your investigation table. And then occasionally do some small group teaching activities where you can teach a specific skill or develop their understanding of how a piece of equipment can be used. But if the adults are modelling using technology for a variety of purposes, then the children will copy. And as Louise said, it's that importance of getting them to use the creatively use the technology to achieve something. And that will only come about if they are familiar with it and confident with it, because it's there all the time for them to access.
Thank you. In the next section, we're going to be talking about children returning to school following the lockdown. And we couldn't have this webinar at this moment in time without having a moment really to focus on that. It's been a real challenge, hasn't it, for all of us, and particularly for young children. Some will be going back to school, some will have already gone back to school. With the government changes to their advice. And so question 3 for Vicky and Amanda is, what are the challenges for nursery or reception children who are returning to school following this period of lockdown?
I think it's the social anxiety aspect of it, to be honest. The children have been away from their friends for a long time, and they've been away from what they class as the norm. Their norm is being around their parents, maybe a sibling. Some children haven't even got a sibling to be around. All the routines that they're used to coming in, I know from the early years do a fantastic job of building these things up so that when they hit kind of key stage 1 and key stage 2, it is the norm to come into school. And also as well, the ratios that the children are used to being around, even a 1-to-6 ratio when there's 1 teacher and 6 pupils, that can be quite overwhelming for the children. So I think kind of looking at especially ways that we can encourage them to come in, and understanding that the parents have also got a reservation probably with them coming into school as well. So they've got a lot to contend with, I think, as they do come in, to be honest.
Yeah, Amanda, have you got anything else to add to that?
Indeed, yes, I couldn't agree more. I think the reality is that obviously we know that children are like sponges, and they are soaking up constantly what is going on around them. And unfortunately, at the moment, they will be soaking up a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress around coming back into education. And that can have a really traumatic effect upon a child and the way that they perceive the world around them, whether that's a safe space or whether that's a space that is full of threat. And I think for a great many children, they will be coming in having lost the capacity at this moment in time to see the world as a safe place to be. So that, you know, rebuilding those relationships, rebuilding that trust, understanding children's meltdowns, understanding what is going on in their world at this time is absolutely critical. Obviously, we're going to be dealing with the regression in terms of their academic skills, but that shouldn't be our priority at this point. It's very much looking at how those children are going to cope with something new. They're coming into what they expect to be what it was before, but it's not anymore. So they come in and their environment looks different. The behaviours that we're expecting and asking them to produce and perform are not the same anymore. Even our behaviour with them, you know, we're supposed to be following guidance that means that we 2 meters socially distance from it's impossible, and our young children are going to have to adjust to that in the same way that we are. So yeah, they're soaking up a lot of anxiety, and we need to work with that.
Yeah, thank you. And sort of going on from what you've just said there about the classroom environment being very different, and from that there will be areas that they were able to access before and equipment that they were able to access before which is no longer available to them. How would you go about explaining to a child which areas of equipment can be accessed and which ones can't be accessed now?
Honestly and simply, I think the mistake would be to not be honest, because they've already heard an awful lot anyway, so there's no point trying to pretend this isn't happening. They need to understand the basics in a very simple and clear and non-threatening way. So simple things like, you know, well, we've got to keep our toys extra clean at the moment, just because we're all trying to stay extra safe. I know we're really good at sharing at our school, but at the moment these toys are just for you to play with. We can still share our smiles and our kind words, but these toys are just for us at the moment. You know, we know how to do this. We've got all those lovely phrases. It's just adopting them in a more regular way, really, I think. everything. And you know, turn taking, well, it's not our turn to play in this part of school at the moment, but it will have a turn another day, and it's for our friends at the moment. So it's using all of the common language that children are already familiar with, so that they've still got something to hook into. But ultimately we have to explain that things have changed a little bit, but try to put that out there in a way that doesn't actually add to their anxiety.
Yes, that's really helpful, thank you. We're moving on to our section, which is focusing specifically on using technology. And the first question is, how can technology be used to support the children's physical development? We're going to go to Vicky first for this question.
From experience of working in kind of the early years setting, it's how activities are set up, where they're set up in the room. They don't have to be indoors, they can be outdoors. You can get away with a lot of unplugged resources with early years as well. Developing better sense of space. When I've been working with children, using resources in the early years setting, like the bricks to create mazes, so that the children get used to manoeuvring around an area, because obviously children are on a massive spectrum of kind of their physical ability. Some children find that hard, some children don't. Things like lying down, using tummy time, thinking about children with, you know, that need to use all their senses. I do a lot of work where I kind of place things outside in sand trays, up a height, down on the floor, so that the children are constantly manoeuvring around, and they have to think really carefully about how, you know, how they move around a certain area. I predominantly do a lot of coding. I do a lot of programming work with children. Looking at robots as well, understanding, linking language as well to movement, and understanding what you mean by an instruction, I think is really, really key. Making the sense of the language. So I do a lot of kind of, I'll do a movement and I'll introduce some key vocabulary to the children, but I'll have an action with it so the children understand what I'm talking about. But with the kind of physical development of actually manoeuvring and moving around an area, I think it also develops things like fine motor skills. I progress from kind of robots into iPads or tablets and things like that, and just developing fine motor skills. I do a lot of work with boys who are reluctant writers, who don't want to pick up a pencil or a paintbrush, using technology and bringing it in to kind of guide them and develop their fine motor skills, so that they can actually access a pencil, and they want to because they've got the strength behind their hand, because they've done a lot of kind of exercise with all of the muscles that build up those skills of writing. So I think it really does support physical development. Really, it's astronomical where children start and where they get to, if you think very carefully about the space that you've got within your kind of classroom to develop tech in your classroom, and what you're actually asking the children to use as well.
Amanda.
I think the skill, the strength, the value of computational thinking and computing is that it doesn't even need a computer. It's amazing. It's wonderful, and you pick it up and you apply it to anything and anywhere that you are at any given time. You know, when you actually think about the word of perseverance, well, we're going to persevere to climb this tree. Let's think logically about why that team scored more goals than we did. It's about debugging that football match. Okay, so let's think about that. Let's work that out. You can make a dance algorithm outside. There's the actual physical connection to computational thinking it's as big as you want to make it, and it's as creative as you want to make it. There are no limits.
Yeah, thanks for drawing that to our attention, that use of computational thinking vocabulary, and not feeling the pressure that it has to be directly linked to a device. So that was really helpful, thank you. And Rachel.
I mean, I absolutely think the myth that that computing is about sitting children in front of a screen and have them sat passively can be completely debunked in early years, because aside from all the fine motor control that comes with using the on-off switches and the tapping and swiping on the tablets, and the spatial awareness that they get as they develop their use of remote control cars and things like that, like Vicky was saying. But I've also used technology like timers. So the iPad timer that kind of very visual countdown of how long you've got to do an activity or how long you're allowed to stay in a particular area. And I think with Joe Wicks, if they've been doing that, they're going to be very used to the 30 seconds active, 20 seconds rest, whatever it is. So timers are great. But there are some really good websites as well that really promote that physical activity. Things like Active Kids Do Better, Go Noodle, a little bit manic, but kids love it. And there's Family Go Noodle, the kind of Zumba Kids thing, which a little bit more approachable perhaps. But then also things like Cosmic Kids and their yoga, calmer, mindful type activities. And then with the Active Kids Do Better, what I really like is there's an activity builder where you can put together a sequence of exercises, create your own dance algorithm, your own workout algorithm, if you like. But then I was thinking Fitbits, heart rate monitors. I remember I was out in the playground and a child who was particularly reluctant, didn't want to stay out there very long. I looked at my Fitbit and said, oh no, I've only got 2,000 steps, I can't go in yet. And he was fascinated by the number, that idea of that you can count the number of steps you've had, you can measure your heart rate. So we were comparing my heart rate and his heart rate. Obviously we can't share Fitbits just at the moment, but that's a way of bringing that kind of everyday technology into use. There's also your interactive whiteboard in the classroom, and Vicky talked about those boys who are reluctant to pick up a pencil. Sorry, it is often boys, but getting them drawing those big anti-clockwise circles and scribbles on the whiteboard, and they just love it that they can press a button and it all disappears instantly. So that kind of engagement, absolutely, there's so many ways of developing their physical skills through technology and use of technology.
There's a couple of questions that have come in, so we're just going to pause for a second. Anybody from the panel is very welcome to respond. The first one is related to the current situation, and Farah asks, can you please touch on principles of good practice for children? And this is when they're using ICT, especially after we go back after the lockdown. As she says, the emphasis at the moment is on outdoor play. And we've heard a lot, as you know, on the news and the media about meeting up outside. So she wants to know what the principles are for good practice for children using ICT in the current situation.
I would probably say looking at your unplugged resources, especially the barefoot ones. I mean, you can socially distance children and do a dance routine very easily. Develop the algorithm using all the key language. Things like using chalk and developing a route that you might want to follow around a certain space and setting children up so that they, you can do that thing of, when they get to that cross, you can move to that cross. And I think you can build quite adventurous little activities to do with, as we said, like things like having little stations, using music, using CD players, and just being like obviously aware that things need to be cleaned up before they're used again by another group of children. But I think it's really doable, and I think it brings a refreshing side to teaching. I think it opens teachers up to think quite creatively about what they're doing, to be honest.
I think also to add on to what Vicky was saying there, that if you use just a simple digital camera, the opportunities open up there for the cases that you capture children doing those activities. They become creators of the digital content, just about consumers. So they have a brilliant model in the Joe Wicks, etc., dance activities that Rachel has talked about, and they then can use that as a model and then adapt that model. They can then go back and they can look at parts of it, even if you're just using simple photographs in where you can decompose that actual dance or whatever activity they're doing. And what you've got is all those computational behaviours or concepts that you're focusing in on at a very young age, and they are in charge of it because they are in charge of that technology, and that can happen very easily outside.
Yeah.
And just have the dental.
Sorry, go on, Rachel.
have the dental wipes ready to wipe down the iPad, to wipe the speak microphone, to wipe down the camera. Yeah.
Thank you. And the other question was about giving some advice to help parents these days when children are spending a lot of time on screens, and perhaps have spent more time on screens if they've been at home for a longer period of time. Yeah, what advice can you give to help parents?
I think with going back to referring to Sonia Livingston, London's School of Economics report that was out a couple of years ago, in terms of, I think to what was found is it's a case of quality, not quantity, and I think that that's the key to it. Digital time isn't bad per se. It's like everything. It's what you're doing. It's the quality of it, it's the engagement with it, it's what questions are going on around it, what's the outcomes of it, how's it shared, what's the purpose of it.
I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, the reality is that if we had a child who wanted to spend an hour writing, nobody would complain. But if you want to spend an hour on a screen, then everybody's in uproar. It's what are you doing on the screen? What are you getting out of that? I think, you know, we do have a lot of hang-ups about technology, and rightly so, but it is very much about looking at what the impact is of that on that child, and actually trying to balance ourselves up a little bit and say, actually, hold on a minute, if this was a different activity, would I be worried? Let's have a look at what they're actually doing.
I think, thank you.
You're all the time looking for that focus and that engagement, but I think we can support parents by giving them sort of ideas for apps and videos that are perhaps a little bit more educational than some of them ones that they might stumble across on YouTube. So that's how we can...
Sorry, going on from that point, Rachel, I just wanted to highlight a couple of fairly new resources which are free, that are aimed at parents for supporting technology and computing done at home. One of you mentioned the Barefoot website, and I know that they've just released a new part of their website which is called At Home, and that's full of resources. Some of them are activities done away from the computer, and some of them can be done online. So there's a nice balance there between the two that are free and available. And also Computing at School, we released a set of videos for parents, fun activities that are linked to other parts of the curriculum, like cooking, drumming, so music, gardening, and football. So lots of other activities with the links to the computing curriculum, but perhaps not how a parent would think of computing, or even children. So do check those out, they're available on the website. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, and this is looking specifically at apps, and it is that there are many apps which promote speaking and listening skills, just to name a few: Chatterpix, Puppet Pals, Sock Puppets, etc. If you could choose your top 3, what would they be and why? And we're going to go to Louise first of all to answer that question.
Well, I love Chatterpix, because if people aren't aware what Chatterpix is, Rachel's giving me a thumbs up there, because what it does is you take a photograph, thanks Vicky, and of anything, and then you just draw kind of with your finger over the tablet. I think it's available on both Android and iOS, and what the child can do is record then where the line is, so it makes a mouth. Here's an example that I used with early years. They had some chicks in the classroom, and they had to paint their chicks, and then we took a photograph of the painting of the chicks, and then using Chatterpix, the children brought their chicks alive, and we had great fun. They were either personalising themselves, the chicks, or they were talking about how they felt as a chick. So it was, you know, just brought their learning and what they had done alive, and a beautifully cross-curricular as well, and fantastic for rehearsing their spoken language, because they became their own critics. No, I want to do it again. I want to record it again. Okay, we can record it again as many times as you like. And because it's such a simple app, that they are in charge of that. I don't have to be. I just have to, as Rachel was saying, you just have to model it once or twice, and then they're in charge of it. In fact, I couldn't get the iPads back. That was how positive that was. So I love Chatterpix. That's a great one. Do you want me to mention other ones at this point?
Please do.
Okay. Other one that probably using in reception is Book Creator, and there is a free version of that. I know the app, the full version is a little bit expensive. I think it's about $3.99 now, but fantastic. There's also a online version which is brilliant as well, where a teacher can build up their own library and make that available to the children in their class. Now, what I love about that app is the fact that children can use the camera facility within a tablet, or they can use a video. I prefer using the photographs, because then it has the brilliant easy addition of a record button that they can record over what they have taken a photograph of, be it their own work, being what they've gone round. So they're building up a book of what they find interesting. They can retell stories, they can retell poems, sing rhymes, whatever they were. And so they're actually being digital publishers from a very young age. And I just love that it just gives them that power. My final one would just simply be any sound recorder on a device. Get them to talk. Tell me what you think. What was that about? Tell them, interview each other, sing songs. I know that Rachel's used as well, and I've used them as well. Easy Speaks. I've also used the Olympus voice recorders, which is an adult piece of technology, but I'm all for putting that into young children's hands. And they have just gone off, told their stories, retold stories, interviewed each other, sung loads of songs, and it's just them just practicing their spoken language. And I just think it's so enriching and so powerful for young children.
Thank you. Vicky?
Yeah, I'm also supporting things like there's an app that I've used with reception and early years called Keysi. It's kind of advertised as a music app, but you can use it in English, maths, anything. And the idea is that you get eight boxes, and you can record different sounds in each box. It's literally a tap, hold, record, tap, hold, record, tap, hold, record. And what you can do is, I've used it before. I've actually used it with a year 2 class and a year 1 class when we were writing instructions, and we had to think about the instructions about how we were going to create something, and we recorded each part, and then we gave our iPad, and we didn't record it in order, we recorded it in a different order, and we gave the iPad to somebody else, and the children had to work out which colour came next. And they had to follow the instructions. You can use it really simply like kind of like Garageband as well, where you can create sounds, or if you've got an instrument, they can use an instrument and record that instrument, and then they can create almost like a melody with all the instruments playing at certain times, and it's just a tap of a screen. Absolutely fantastic. And I think Keysi's free at the minute, so it's a fabulous.
Can you just spell that? Somebody was asking, can you spell the word Keysi? I think people are taking notes as you're just speaking.
I think I put it on one of the handouts as well, just so that you could see what it looks like, because I know when people talk about apps and they're like, oh, what was it called? What does it look like? Loads come up, but it's Keezy. And you can use something very similar in Garageband, where I've done it before, where you can choose the instruments and you can decide how often you want the instrument to play, so you can talk to the kids about tempo. And I've done this with an early years class, and they absolutely loved it. And all I did is I did a little bit of modelling beforehand. I got a sheet and I got the instruments, and they decided with a cross on a, almost like on a stave, on a piece of musical notation, where they decided on a column, on a row, sorry, where they were going to have an instrument playing, and then they transferred that onto their iPad, and then they played it for the class, and we made up words to this, we made the songs up to it. It was fantastic fun. So you can do it on GarageBand. Don't think GarageBand is just for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. You can use it in early years. So that's a brilliant one. Code Carts as well. It's I think it's an American-based app, but Code Carts is a fantastic one for encouraging children to move from control robots to programmable devices. So programming a robot on which is a car on a track. So this has got about, I think it's got about, if you pay £1.99, I think you get about 70 levels. It's brilliant, and the kids love it. I've done it in early years, and the kids are teaching their parents how to use it, and grandparents when they come in. So in other words, at the beginning you create a little algorithm with arrows, and you can, and there's little kind of hints on the screen as to how the car is moving, and you move the car around the track. pulling the algorithm together as you do it, and you can do it in sections. So that idea of decomposition and breaking a problem down into parts, they don't have to do it all in one go. And then as it builds up, the children are allowed to respray their car, they can change their car, they can compete against another car to see if they can beat that car to the finish line by creating an algorithm. And it's just a touch of a screen, and the kids are hyper as soon as they see their car racing. It's fantastic. Another one along the line of kind of code carts is called Coding Safari. Fantastic. And if you want to do anything to do with kind of habitats or what animals need to eat in order to live or where they might live, it introduces all types of animals. And what you have to do is it's kind of it's to do with kind of developing logic problems with children and how an animal would get to a habitat or its den or get to the food. And the children have to bring in kind of the coding blocks in order to get that animal to the space. At first, it's just by creating a path. So they have to pull the path in, and it highlights the path that's wrong, so the children know where they've gone wrong and they can move things around. And the children get so used to it that then it progresses into arrows. So it builds that idea of symbols being used to reference how something is moving. And I see children move drastically quickly through it, and they never get bored. They never get bored of it. As soon as you say Coding Safari is coming out, they're there ready to have a go. And you can link that to all the robot work that you're doing. So you could have a group doing, you know, creating routes on paper or with arrows, with chalk in the playground. But then you can also kind of highlight it in, you know, on the app as well, which is fantastic. Another one that people probably heard of is something called Busy Bundle. You can get a free trial of it, but if you pay, I think it's £1.99 again, which is nothing really. There are about 5 or 6 different parts to it. The bit that the children like is there's a coding aspect of it, where a programmable aspect of it, where you get a helicopter and you've got to save the cows from the monsters, and the children love it. So you have to get the cow and put him in the correct path. There's loads of logic problems to it, so the children have to maneuver around trees and press the correct arrow to get the helicopter to go and pick up the cow, put him across to the bath and put him in the right bath. It's even funny things, even thought of things that if you put the cow in the wrong place, the cow puts his legs out to try and protect itself from the monsters. It's brilliant fun. But there's loads of aspects to that Busy Bundle that I like. There's an area where you can dress up a character in the clothing for different purposes. There's another area where there's a driving game, and you create your own moving picture, and you can press play, so you pull in all the cows, the cars, the trees, you can position them, so all that kind of idea of moving something to where you want it to be. And then what you do is press play and your picture comes to life and the cars travel off. And so there's a lot of logic problems in it that I think are fantastic. There's a maths area to it as well, where you can start looking at simple addition, building a number up. So they might have numbers up to 10, and they've got to think all numbers up to 15, and they've got to pull the bricks in, and a little dog comes down on a bungee cord, picks the number up and puts it into the column, and it builds the number up, and they've got to try and hit a target. So there's loads of aspects in there, but there's lots of kind of, the one area I would say for speaking and listening is the fact that as soon as the kids do something, they want to share it. If they succeed in what they're doing, they immediately get their iPad and go, look what I've just done, and you hear, without any kind of restrictions, the children just start talking to each other, and they teach each other how to use things. And you generally don't need to be there. They just tell each other what to do. And it's fantastic, that approach. So I'd say, yes, there are specific ones for speaking and listening, but if you pick the right app, it transcends in the classroom, and you can see the speaking and listening that comes out of it, because you just have to say, so what have you been doing? And they just open like a floodgate and they'll tell you exactly what's been happening. But there's lots out there, and don't be afraid to kind of trial them for, you know, trial parts of it and just see if they're okay for you. But £1.99 for a 5-part app, I would say is reasonable in school as well. So
lots of people have been asking about the apps that you've mentioned, and I'm just drawing people's attention to the fact that we have 3 handouts available accompany this webinar. So please download those handouts for more information about all the apps that are being spoken about. And also, just to say that we've only got 4 minutes left, so I'm going to let Rachel answer that question. But I am going to draw your attention to lots of other meetings and webinars and things that you can join and sign up to that are coming up over the next few weeks. So Rachel, if you want to give your response to that.
Story Cubes, a great app that you can use. It's a representation of a physical resource that we use for storytelling. So it develops creative and imaginative storytelling. When they roll the dice, they get different pictures, and you can do that on the app. If I can do that here, you roll the dice. So even if they haven't got the physical resource at home, they can have the app at home and do that at home now. Mash cams, part of Purple Mash, but brilliant. They use the webcam to take a photograph of themselves dressed up as fairy princess or snowman or deep sea diver, whatever it is, and then they can use that to talk about what they're doing. And then the app Too Noisy, it's a sound meter, basically measures the levels of sound, and I use this quite a bit, particularly with special needs speech and language activities where children whisper all the time. And you can get them talking a little bit louder and see if they can get the rain cloud to appear and things like that, the thunder and lightning. So those are 3 apps that I would really recommend. And then can I just share my toy, Wendy? Because this is here. Early years, lots and lots of robots around, but this is Ozobot. Brilliant for getting those reluctant writers pick up a pen and making marks, because you're coding with coloured lines. They draw a red line on the page, and this little chap will follow the line, and his light will turn red. But just switching him on is a good challenge for them to start with. But I'll put the link to a video in the handout. So the video is some children using it. So one of those handouts that Wendy's referring to, there's a link to that, and you can see with children using the Ozobot. Very, very exciting. Lots of learning. They weren't reluctant writers at that point, I have to say, but there's still lots of brilliant learning.
Just to kind of add on to it, I'll just hold them up. I don't know if you can see them, but these are the robots that I kind of suggest. Just if you've got a limited budget and you can't afford to pay kind of the Hope magazine costly Bbots, these are virtually the same thing. This is called Doc by Clementoni. This is one that I would really recommend. It's got so much scope. I've used this from early years right up into year 5, believe it or not. This robot you can draw pictures with. You can do tangrams and get it to draw your tangram. You can actually code it with the buttons on the side here, but you can also link it to your iPad or tablet, so you can actually get it to travel using your using the actual iPad. But you can also do things. So if you've got Key Stage 2 children and you're teaching angles, you can actually go into the advanced coding part of it, and you can ask it to actually measure a certain distance in. So for example, I could set it to 30 centimeters and send it off and set the angles on it as well. So that one, I think you can get those for about £45. Clementoni Mind, they're called. And it also, you can record your voice and you can get it to listen to your instructions as well. Fab. And that's another one. That's if you've got reluctant writers, you can use that, and the children can use a whiteboard and pen to draw pictures and be quite creative. And it's got number, words, tangrams, all sorts, and you can create stories with it. My son's addicted to this, and you can get all the coding parts to this programming as well. That's another one, a really good one. Osmo.
I just want to put one last shout out, is I've had hours of fun in early years with microscopes. Digital microscopes is, there's a variety of them. I've used the TTS one, which looks like a little egg, and they can take photographs with it, but also the Celestron, which are, industry standard. And I'm all for trying to use really the proper tool as opposed to a slimmed down version if you can. And they're quite cheap. There's quite cheap versions of that. And I just kept having friends coming and looking with this microscope, and just that inquiry I've just been looking through a microscope has been really successful in your years. So I would really encourage people to invest in one of those if you haven't got one already.
Thank you. Just to draw things to a close, there's a bit of a whistle-stop tour there, but I'm delighted to tell you that we've got lots of other events coming up. Some of them are being run by some of the panelists here this morning. So the first one to mention is next week one of our community leaders called Holly Newell is running an early years special for her community meeting. This session is looking at resources, provision, LTPs and learning journeys, and it's on Tuesday the 16th of June at 11 AM. Vicky Dodds, who's been speaking this morning, is presenting at our virtual showcase, which is coming up soon and runs across the last 2 weeks of June. She's doing an early years session on the 24th of June at 11 AM, and her session is called Embedding Key Computing Skills in EYFS Settings. Rachel is launching her Stevenage Primary Community Meeting next week, and her first meeting is on Tuesday, June the 16th at 4 till 5 PM. And just to let you know, she's also running a couple of sessions on Thursday, the 9th of July, entitled Effective Use of Technology in the Early Years. So if you want to hear more from Rachel, you can tune in either at midday from 12, or the session will be repeated again at 4 o'clock. And Amanda is running an early years computing special community meeting on Wednesday, the 8th of July. It's after school, it's 4 till 5. Can I encourage everybody listening, if you haven't done so already, please sign up for the CAS Facebook page, the primary group, which is one of the simplest ways to be kept up to date with all our sessions. All our events are free and they can be booked via the CAS website. If you'd like to download the handouts from this morning's webinar, then they are on the control panel for you to download. I'm also going to put them on the CAS website. So I'll put on the CAS forum following this session, I'll put them up there as well. So you'll be able to get them from the CAS website if you haven't been able to download them this morning. And all there is left to say is thank you so much to everybody who joined the webinar today. A special thanks to our panelists, Rachel Coulthard, Louise Wade, Vicky Dodds and Amanda Hubble. And we look forward to seeing you again at a future event run by Computing at School. Goodbye.